Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Great Employees Matter weekly podcast. Today we have a phenomenal guest, Joe Rockey. Joe has a lot of podcasting experience, so we're just going to kind of let this podcast run. And Kobe, are you on? I can't hear you. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and go with Joe. So, Joe, what Kobe would normally ask you at this point is, rather than what I did initially in our strategy session and ask you to tell us how you got here professionally, Kobe likes to go back to your roots and learn a little bit about your childhood and kind of that background stuff that made you the person that you are today. And then we'll go into the business side of it. So,
can you hear me?
There you are.
Okay, cool. We'll just go like this.
All right.
So sweet. You just took a little bit, but yeah, I do like to start from the beginning. I've been looking at some of your stuff, and I love the fact that you manage the relationships between business and employees, because that's exactly what Great Employees is about. And we're not focused on the employees. We are kind of focused on both sides, because you got to kind of facilitate a great environment in order to facilitate great employees in the environment. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. I will rewind it and go back and say, hey, where are you from? And we'll start there. Where are you from? You could tell us a little bit about your background, your schooling, and your first couple of jobs, and then we'll open up from there.
Awesome. Well, absolutely. Yeah, certainly. So we can do that. First off, one thing I want to make sure that we get across to everyone here who's watching is, I'll outline exactly how to fix the relationship between your business and your employees. In my consulting firm, what I find the biggest problem is that most business owners think their personal relationship is the relationship their business has with their employees. And that just naturally causes the problem. But you guys are asking for the long-term history. Let's dive right into it. My first official job, I guess, when I was 16 was in sales. I've been doing sales ever since, in one format or another, knowing that owning your own business is owning a sales machine. I came out of college at Duquesne during the heart of the last recession with an accounting and finance degree. So who got blamed in the last recession? The banks and accounting firms. Remember, that's when they all started crashing and stuff. So I had a gig all lined up middle of November or whatever. And then when March came around, I got this letter that said, hey, we're firing people with 30 years experience. We're not bringing you on the bus. So that was awesome, with about a 6-week span of figuring out what you're going to do when you're 22. I ended up doing life insurance and annuities, because if you can pass a test, they will hire anyone. That's what that industry does. Long story short, first year I was Rookie of the Year. Second year I was Underclassman of the Year. And third year I left to start my first of what eventually became 27 different businesses. Currently, we're focusing upon elite business conversations, which is where we help transform business owners' businesses so that they will continue to live. The majority of my clients, before we start working with them, deep down know that if they quit working today, their business would be dead by the end of the weekend. We make it so their business won't just survive, but thrive without them. And the way that we do that is by fixing this relationship between the employees and the business, as well as the relationship between the clients and the business. Because the real secret of life, and this is to give a little preview for what we're going to talk about here, success in the old days was measured by how much money did you have, how much power did you have, how big was your castle. Then it eventually grew into how much leisure time can I have. Neither one of those is the answer to true success in life. True success in life is how many quality relationships do you have and how do you make them better? And that's what I teach people how to get better at in my sales course, Casino Sales Master, where I took my sales system into a place on earth that you're supposed to lose no matter what. Everyone knows that the house always wins and the casino will take your money. Well, not if you know how to sell correctly, and not if you know how to build relationships. And that's what I do both in the book and then the accompanying coaching course. So hopefully that's enough background for you guys, and you're ready to dive into the meat of teaching people how we can build better relationships and how to make people want to run through fire for your business without destroying your bottom line.
You're gonna have to excuse me. I'm not ready yet because I got a couple of more questions that I just want to open up with you just a little bit. I want to find out. This is a niche area. What did you do, or what caused you to want to go into this position? Was there a job, or did something happen to you to where you wanted to fix that situation? Why would you focus on this as a company?
Which one, the sales one or the consulting one?
The consulting one, as far as being able to manage between employees and businesses, the communication.
So what dove me into there was, long story short, you can't have 27 businesses and not learn how to deal with employees. Way that we as a country treat the labor market is horrendously wrong. And there's just so many faults in there. And I found myself keep doing it differently. Quite frankly, I find myself keep doing it differently than a lot of my competition, regardless of what business I'm in. So to give a little backtrack, since you're interested in that, one of my first businesses, in fact, the first business, was a rental company. I became buying a bunch of properties and then renting them out to people, right? Pennsylvania is the 5th hardest state, legally speaking, against landlords, just the way that it is. So there's a lot of lawyers involved with even the most basic things. So I, being me, wanted to push around and see how can we get a solution where I can solve some of the worst problems that the landlord has to deal with. Property maintenance, not having tenants, having to clean up after the tenants, and basically having the neighbors hate me because of the tenants I picked. All those things are bad. And how can I get around solving these problems in a way that doesn't hurt my bottom line? And essentially what the answer became was, well, how about instead of treating the tenant like a potential problem who's going to let the grass get high, who's going to let the ice form, who's going to keep their noise off till 6 a.m, instead of having the tenant viewed as that problem, as most landlords do, let's figure out a way to create a package where they're incentivized to actually make the property awesome and good, and maybe even want to be there forever, which is the goal of a landlord. Have tenants that don't turn over, right? So long story short, that's what we did. In a lot of other states, it would have been a whole lot easier than what it was in Pennsylvania. But at the end of the day, we had them essentially do what the rest of the country knows as rent to own. They are buying the property eventually with the ends of owning it. So therefore, they do care about it. They do care about cutting the grass, etc. So that's the starting point of how my mind works to wanting to solve problems. Well, then fast forward into the catastrophe that we all went into. In addition to being the 5th worst state for landlords, we were also the 5th worst shut down state during COVID, to the point where you weren't allowed to have a crew working on a roof, which is outside and in blazing heat, which was supposed to be what killed the thing. You weren't allowed to have them doing that unless there was someone living in the house. Said another way, as soon as you had a vacancy or you were doing a flip, you couldn't have anyone working on it. You also weren't allowed to evict anyone either. So you add all of that math together upon the real estate industry, and it ain't going to work too good. So there was a lot of people around me, a lot of my peers, saying, how can I make this business work without me? Because they are being such a difficult process, the government is, to make this work. So fast forward, I do that. I started doing the actual how you're doing your work stuff then. And then I realized I just saved like 7 people's businesses. They should have given me part of the action to be in doing that. And then I was like, well, let's just make it official and do it. And then boom, Elite Business Conversations was born.
I love it. Well, you got 27 businesses under your belt. I would say that's serial entrepreneurship, which I love, right? And so I think that probably helped shape you wanting to, I mean, not wanting to, you had to come up with a way to be able to manage your relationships between business and employees after 27 businesses. So after doing that, what are some common barriers to effective communication in the workplace that you see, and how can people overcome them? Now we can start the conversation, and then I'll back off and let the other guys share in the interview as well.
So to answer that question, I think that the first problem that you have, especially, again, I work primarily in the space of smaller businesses. Not saying I can't work at higher. I've done trainings for the big guys. We'll just let's stay out there. But for my predominant clients that I'm walking in and overhauling and transforming their system, we're talking about 25 employees or less. And what you predominantly have in that space, I'll address upon the bigger company problem in a minute. But starting with the small companies, you tend to have what I call Wayne Gretzky syndrome. And Wayne Gretzky, for those of you who don't know, was by far the best hockey player who's ever played. But when he became a head coach, was horrible at it. And the reason is because he expected everyone to be like him. It's natural. You went through life, every single shot you take hit that top right corner, went in the net. It was perfect. Why can't everyone do that? So he was at such an elevated level, he was able to work with PhD on PhD conversations, but couldn't explain it and get the communication right for the common people, which, by the way, was the majority of his team. So that's why it didn't work. So the same thing happens in businesses, is that the founder knows everything about their product or their service. I know how to make this SaaS thing. I can write code until, I'm blue in the face. I will make everything work. Why can none of you guys else figure out these problems? Well, there's lots of stuff to that. Normally, it's because you don't know how to synthesize it and put it into layman's terms. But the other part is just a starting point of expectations. So you have that issue as what I would say is being the predominant issue up front. The second issue you have, and now this starts to blend into all companies, is fear. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Fear of being shown that there's someone else better than you, and that's a fact of life. It happens to a lot of different people. I don't want to train my replacement because they're going to be better than me and they're going to take my job. So that's why I'll never talk to them or teach them how to do this. The reality, the only thing you're doing is putting an anchor around your waist, keeping you from swimming to the surface. But that is the fear that has consumed people. And it is a remnant of the 1960s coming into our workflow. But that's the fact of life. So it starts by putting yourself in a much better position mentally to be able to handle basically rejection in relationships, and also being able to just communicate things on a base level that doesn't need to be a PhD conversation. At the end of the day, we're all using microphones and stuff like that. I have no idea how these things work, aside from the fact that there's a battery. If it ain't charged, you guys don't hear me. I mean, do I need to know much more than that? If I'm making the microphones, I do. But if I'm being on a podcast, I don't. So do we need to get into all these high-level things about how to make a YouTube channel or LinkedIn message take off? Yes and no. No, you don't need to know all the algorithms, how to write a tag, which companies should be using for hosting, etc. But you do need to know how to have a conversation that people want to relate to. And that's the key difference that so many people get into their companies. Either A, they don't invite people to have the conversation because they're afraid that I'll get shown as I don't know every answer and, I can't have that. Or B, I've never tried to explain this to anyone and I look down upon you for not knowing it. That might be the same coin, just talking on two different sides of it, but that is two significant problems that I regularly see in the workforce that need to be addressed.
No, that's awesome, man. We actually got a good question coming in from one of our guests, Sachiko, and I think this is a great question. It says, "What are some strategies for employees to effectively voice their concerns or suggestions to management?" And I look at the climate today as far as, I was a corporate manager for some years, and that can be a challenge, especially if there's a one-way expectation from management. So it's really hard for you to, address things. So what do you think about that question from Sachi?
So you got to start with the Sachi, I know you didn't say this directly, but I'm going to make the assumption here on your behalf because 95% of the time it's the case, is that you're afraid to go to whoever the manager is because there will be negative repercussions upon you, either subtly or not so subtly. This directly correlates to what I was just saying about having the fear of someone showing me that I'm doing it wrong or that I'm somehow not worthy enough to be here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a drill, and your mind is actually going to tell you the right answer. If you guys are okay with me walking people through a drill.
Great.
So what I want you to do is put yourself physically in a space that you're not normally at. So if your desk has a chair sitting across from for the guests that come into your room, sit in that. For most people, we haven't sat on the floor since we were 3 years old. That's always a great option. Physically put yourself in a space that you don't normally go to. And then make that space as sensory deprived as possible. Make it dark, make it quiet, make sure your phone is off. Then I want you to close your eyes. And this is something that every single person can do, and it will improve your relationship skills. I want you to close your eyes and think about any situation in your life that didn't go the way you wanted it to. Most of us, this will be like typing in a Google search for a very generic term that has 500 million pages worth of answers. And your brain will naturally rank those answers into the least scariest thing to go back and think about to the most scariest thing to go back and think about. And while your mind is closed, or while your eyes are closed, go into one of the easier ones and sit in that environment where something didn't happen the way you want it to. And what you need to do is look at the two people or multiple people involved as just person A, B, or C if there's three of them. Take all of your emotion from that event out of the situation. And if possible, try to even leave your body and just watch in your mind's eye this interaction between person A and person B. And knowing that every relationship is supposed to be different. What I mean by that is children treat each other different than they treat their parents, than they treat their cousins. Employees treat the boss different than they treat other coworkers. We know there's natural differences in relationships, and they're supposed to be. Looking at this relationship in your mind's eye, this interaction that occurred, was person A and person B acting correctly? And this is the hard part for about 30% of you watching this. You then need to not do anything about it. You need to sit in that situation in your mind's eye and just sit in it. Don't try to fix it. Just sit in it. And ultimately what will happen, and this is the drill I have all my clients do every Monday morning, by the way. Ultimately, what will happen is you'll come back to this the following Monday and you'll be able to go to something that's a little bit harder memory and a little bit harder. And again, you're just sitting in it. You're not necessarily going, how would I have done it differently or how would I solved it? That's a completely different exercise for the following day. But the point of why you need to sit in it is because it's how you trained yourself for what is uncomfortable. So that when there is a moment that I am going to give information to my manager and it could get really bad, people who are not used to sitting in this type of tension will run away and have the blade fall upon their shoulders. But those that can sit in it and absorb it don't have that problem. And that is the starting point of preparing yourself. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Was that you, Kobe?
No, my mic is messing up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
But long story short, that's how you prepare yourself to be able to answer that question, Sasha. I mean, that's how you do it. You get yourself in that mental state. And like I said, it's scary the first couple times you do it. It really, really is. But as you do this as a repeated, regular practice, you're going to start getting to the really scary stuff that's on the back end of your personal Google list. And once you can accomplish sitting in those situations, your entire life will change. And you'll experience it changing as you get through this process. But you will come out on the other side of this fence completely different. You will be, we can see this physically because we all can have eyes and see what our bodies look like. You'll look like the equivalent of whatever your version of Brad Pitt is. That, wow, that's what the emotional equivalent of what the exercise you have gone through. Because we all have people in our lives that I just naturally open up to them. And I don't know why. I just feel natural with them. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason why your subconscious can't explain it to you is because that person is comfortable dealing with tension. So you bringing your perceived issues to them, they weren't giving you issues of run away from me. They were being welcoming and inviting. And this is all stuff we do subconsciously that you can't train to do unless you actually address your own personal ocean of emotions. Again, doing that drill is what I have people do on Mondays to prepare for this.
How interesting. I love the question, Sachi. I love the response, Joe. This is a little bit out of left field because I appreciate that you are as direct as you are, and that I can certainly say that that's how you, in working with your clients, you're asking both the employer and the employee to be comfortable in being direct as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the left field question is, so what do you think about suggestion boxes, especially for those employees that are, concerned about retribution, but yet they need to have some vehicle to get a recommendation out? Do you recommend that or not?
I don't recommend anything that's passive aggressive. Starting point. So the core problem that you have here, and this is, again, as I said, this is a remnant of the 60s that's everywhere, is way too much of our economy is segmented and siloed internally, meaning that we have our sales department, we have our marketing department, and they don't really ever interact. Maybe the top managers interact, but mostly it's just casting blame across each other. That's how most companies set up when you really look at them across the board. That is a fundamental problem that needs to be changed, which can be done, but requires heavy lifting and effort. Now, you are right. There does need to be a mechanism of how to communicate with each other. I always recommend, at worst, doing a FaceTime Skype where you can see the other person. And I understand that there's a lot of people who are more comfortable sitting behind email without the physical interaction. But the more senses you can bring into the conversation, by senses, I mean sight, smell, hear, touch, etc., the better off it is. That's why in person will always be superior to doing this, because yes, you can hear me, you can see me, but we can't shake hands, we can't smell each other, etc. And on that note, smell normally gets a bad rap. It is one of the most better things for embedding thoughts into another person as far as you being remembered the way that you are. It's just a fact. So just throw that out there. But to answer that question, I always invite for more in person. I am a big fan of the office hour policy, but you have to recognize that there's a strong possibility, just like in college, unless it's the day before the test, no one's going to use the office hours. It's part of life, but you still need to have them and have them to be available and have it be open to becoming deeper than just work-like conversations. And that's what I would recommend, because it's much more effective than just a cold drop letter or email type situation of communicating.
Thank you for that. Lloyd?
Yeah, I've been listening to your gems, if you will, and we call them gems. And some of the things that you've offered, I've always maintained. I always like it when I work with people that are smarter than I am. Mm-hmm. Because that builds us up and builds us better to a group, and shouldn't be afraid of that. I'm also extremely impressed. You are by far, I think, the most experienced podcaster we've ever had on the show. And everybody these days wants to start a podcast. Mm-hmm. And in looking at it, something like 98% of all podcasts don't get to the third podcast. By then, they've already given up. Yeah, it's some amazing statistic. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what advice would you give to people that want to start a podcast, and what should they look out for?
Well, the first point you have to recognize up front is why are you doing this in the first place? So the first podcast that I created was called Father and Joe. What we do is I'm with Benedictine priest. His name is Father Boniface Hicks, hence Father and Joe. And what we do is we talk about the relationship that you have with yourself, the relationship you have with others, all underneath the umbrella of the relationship you have with God. Now, I bring this up to say you got to know why you're doing this. We didn't create this with the aim of making millions and millions of dollars. We created it with a much harder aim to actually see, which is to convert people and make them care about the relationship you have with yourself, each other, and the relationship you have with God. That's a very different goal than I'm trying to get clients or I'm trying to get revenue. So you have to know up front what you are trying to achieve, because the reality of podcasting is the majority of it is not fun. Editing it, making sure it's a good quality, how to put it through the algorithm so Apple will distribute it, or YouTube, depending upon which platform you're going more on. There is a lot of math and updated learning that you just have to do to be continuously in it. Or you cut a very big check to someone who does know how to do it. So the reality is you have to know what you're getting in for, and you have to know what it's going to be worth. Because if you think that you're going to become the next influencer, whatever that even means anymore, the likelihood of it happening in your first 300 episodes, even if you publish daily, is very low. So the reality is like I said, the starting point would be know what you are and know what you're trying to accomplish. The one that gets me all the time is these people who start it because they think it'll get them the next speaking gig in front of Apple. That's not quite how it works. Certainly there's speaking opportunities that come from people watching you repeatedly and going, yeah, I would like him to come and talk to my group about how to sell or how to fix the relationship with our employees. Yeah, that happens. But the first couple times you do it, for 75 times you do it, you're not going to be good. And it's one of the things that, like, talking about my own show, and again, I now have 5 of them. Just talking about Father and Joe, particularly the one we started with in 2017, I don't think we actually made a good episode until number 90. And it astounds me that people will still go back to those first episodes and re-listen to them. I'm like, no, they're not as good. like just technically speaking, they're not as good. And that doesn't even include the technology upgrades that happened between the last 8 years. I mean, just look at a car, just in perspective. Think about what a 2017 vehicle is, and then the new car on the lot right now. And same quality increase came with microphones and cameras. So, I'm just talking about my own ability to ask a question and respond. It is night and day. So, very long answer to say, you have to know what you're getting in for. You have to know that your talent level is below freshman grade, and it's going to take a ton of work to get to being the spot of relevancy. And if you think you're going to be Joe Rogan overnight, don't even bother starting.
I love your answer.
No,
go ahead, Lloyd. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's great advice, and that's comes across. Your sales background obviously helped as well. And my question is, it takes a certain amount of courage. You've started 20-something businesses. Mm-hmm. And how do you get the courage to embark on something that you haven't done before? Where does that come from?
Well, I like solving problems. But to give an example, or I guess part of the answer is my first sales coach, my best sales coach I've ever had, because I can't say that I have multiple, because once I got one good one, I didn't feel like replacing it, because Dan Hudock's amazing. Which, by the way, Dan Hudock, shout out, by the way. When I was mid-20s, I forget exactly how old I was, he had us put on a sheet of paper, turn it landscape, and draw a straight line. And then at the end of the line was the age of whichever gender parent or grandparent died at. And then, where are you? Now, everything you want to accomplish, look realistically between here and there. And not to cut to the end of the chase, I know that realistically, to get the stuff that I need at the end, I need to have made at least $250 million. Like, that's how much I'm going to need. So then I can leverage it into the big stuff then. And when you look at it, knowing that your goal is that you need to have $250 million in liquidity, you can't be afraid of jumping over something that might be scared today and it'll look bad. I mean, it doesn't matter which great entrepreneur you look at, really throughout history, they all had a moment that it should have broke. I mean, Carnegie was getting death threats for not being able to pay his bills back when he was building the bridge in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. There was a moment when Carnegie almost died trying to chase what he wanted. So, or correction, that was Rockefeller. But regardless, the core concept is every single one of the great entrepreneurs has had a moment when they saw what their equivalent of a rent notice, power shutoff notice came to them. And if you're afraid of that, you'll never be able to get to the heights. There also is an element of once you've built a business and it didn't work, because I have built 27. Not going to say they all were perfect. I have 2 train wrecks that I recall often about what not to do today and what not to guide clients into. And quite frankly, there's a lot of pulling them out of those waters. Once you've seen the worst and you survived it, it's nowhere near as scary. I mean, you guys are older, but for our younger audience, just think about it. What's the first time you went down a speed water slide? Was that scarier than the second time? For most people, it's not. Once I've done it, it's cool. I might not want to do it again, but at least I know what it was. And that is one of the things I also look at, is that you have to be willing to know that not everything's going to go perfect. A long time ago, I woke up and accepted that there's never going to be a moment when everyone loves me, nor is there going to be a moment when everyone hates me. So therefore, I should just go and do what's best possible to make a difference for everyone. And that's how I get around that answer.
Wow.
Sound advice.
I got one more question for you. It is my Lloyd Dix patented softball question. And today it comes in 2 parts. The question is designed to give you something easy that anybody could answer, and you don't have to think about it all. And so your choice, which one of these 2 do you want to answer? How do I walk into a casino and walk out with enough money so that I never have to worry again for the rest of my life? Or who is the best fantasy football sleeper that I haven't chosen yet that I need to add to my team?
Well, in terms of the sleeper that you don't have yet, that's actually a pretty big answer. I'm going to go the other way with that and say get rid of every Jet that's not named Breece Hall. But to answer your first question, the way that you go about having a casino want to pay you is the same way you go about having your prospects to want to tell you the truth. You have to recognize that up front, even though it's becoming less and less often because of Facebook, there are commonalities that all of us share. One of which of this is that we all were taught to lie to salespeople. All of us. And then over the span of life, it also became, I don't want to work with, discuss, talk to people who we deem as socially lower than us. Those 2 cross currents are really big in our society. So when you go into a casino, you as the bettor are experiencing both of those cross currents in opposite ways. You're experiencing the I don't want to get sold to from the dealers. First off, you got to go to a game that the dealers actually can impact, which there are very few of. The majority of the people in the casino are just dealing cards that a robot shuffled that they have no control over, or they're just facilitating the movement of money. Most games are that in the casino. There's basically 2 that the dealer fully controls: the money wheel and roulette. That's it. The rest of them, they have no impact over. So then it becomes, how can I get this person to actually want to tell me the truth and want to help me? It's the same question we have in sales, business. It's a relationship question. So you have it everywhere. One of the answers is what I gave you in the drill earlier in this episode. You be comfortable with tension. So when you approach a situation, you already look like you're in Baywatch and you're ready to run into the ocean and save anyone's life. Emotionally speaking, that's what you will be. So that is the starting point, to self-prepare yourself relationship-wise. The second is once you're actually there with that dealer, you treat them like a person. You don't get caught in that cross current of looking down at people because they're serving you. And that is so incredibly common. You start just by changing that starting point. You now have stood out instantly in that person's mind. You then create a little bit of an incentive package that's a win-win for both of you, which, again, I dive into in the book. I'm not going to dive into all right now because it takes a lot longer than 10 minutes. But you create a win-win situation with the two of you. And now all of a sudden you recognize that the dealer benefits when you benefit. The dealer can control when you benefit and to a degree how much you benefit. So let's make this all happen. So that's how you go about this. In the sales world, it's the same thing. Just the stigma we have on ourselves as salespeople is the used car salesman. You're not getting off this lot unless you take the car I want you to buy. We all know that. We still see that around us today. That is the 1960s sales method, and it is ubiquitous around us. So how do you be different than that? You actually care about the person. You realize that the way that the history of us buying is wrong, but it's all a story of running away, and this is why we tell to lie to salespeople, because I don't want to be used by that used car salesman who's going to force me down a road. So I'm going to lie to him, I'm going to run away, and I'm never going to come back to him. So how many of us have ever ghosted a salesperson before? I mean, come on. It'd be weird if you didn't. So what makes you different? You recognize that we don't buy by features and benefits, and that everyone who's still teaching that is completely wrong. You don't buy a truck because of 4 wheels and an engine. You buy a truck because I can get to the golf course and fit my 4 friends into it. Or I bought this truck because I want to be able to look down at people. Or I bought this truck because I knew I wouldn't get hurt if I get rear-ended again. All of these are completely different purchasing reasons that end up leaving with the exact same product. Your job as the salesperson is to swim in your client's ocean of emotions to get to what their true reason is. That's why the drill I gave you in the beginning is one of the 5 that we do to have people to be comfortable swimming within your own ocean and other people's oceans of emotions. Because the surface level is where the features and the benefits are. That's comfortable, that's safe. I can talk about how my traction on my truck and my towing capacity and all that stuff. We can do that all day. What's scary is being vulnerable and being willing to open up something about myself so then you feel comfortable to open up something about yourself and then actually getting to it. And I've talked to this to a ton of groups before, a ton of different my clients on stage a ton of times. And for some reason, there's a perception that you can only do this with business to consumer sales. Maybe that's because of the example I used. But the reality is that these skills work actually stronger in business to business sales. So if you find yourself getting caught being put into a bureaucratic buying process where I just have to give you a quote and hope mine comes out the other side as the winner, you'll never successfully have a long-term business or a career. The way you do this is you get engaged with the actual people who are the decision makers. And 9 times out of 10, you'll even bypass having to do a quote in the first place when you do it correctly. So that's how you gave me a softball question. I went 3 different directions. But yeah, long story short, get rid of Garrett Wilson now, train him for everything you possibly can. And then that's how you go about sales.
I think you nailed this softball question again. That's another one. You got to get better with your softball questions because they're knocking them out of the park, bro.
That's why they're softball questions, Kobe.
Yeah. So I actually love your answer. I come from sales background too, and I think you're right. A lot of people get it wrong because they're looking at the features and the things like that instead of having a real conversation and actually getting down to what the person actually needs instead of trying to feed them things that they want. So I love your answer on that. I did want to go back. We have another one of our regular guests. Thank you, Dale, for being a regular guest.
Facebook question come up. Sorry, I couldn't read it, Dale.
Oh yeah, no worries. But it's I used to work for a successful national company which was 50 years old. I asked the owner what was his key to success. He told me his number 1 commodity was his employees and not the product they manufactured. Can you tell us how you approach this way of thinking? And I think Dale is saying it's like it's a weird way of thinking. I too believe that that's the way to go. Is if you take care of your employees and if you manage your employees and make sure that they're happy, they're pretty much going to bulletproof your organization. What do you think about that question?
That's true. Yeah, there's no way around that. That is a true statement. The way that we go about it is, I've kind of alluded to some of the solutions before, is you can't have siloism that ends up being a weapon rather than an asset. All siloism ends up in that standpoint eventually. So the way that we address this, and granted, yes, I'm doing it on smaller companies, but it can be done in literally any size company and any industry for that record, is the starting point you have to recognize as the business is, what is it that my clients reasonably expect from us? And then talking to you guys here, you guys probably were in high school or middle school with the old projector on the screen. Think of that as the clear rectangle up on the screen. That's the client's expectations. Boom, boom. And then you look at what our company's resources are being spent upon: time, money, energy, etc. And we put that as the dark spot and see how much that covers up the client's expectations. And almost always, we're going to find that there's a great deal of resources used on things that are outside of client's expectations. And then there's holes within the client's expectations. And this is natural for businesses to do. We started doing one thing, we got good at it, and we just kept doing it, and we never adjust with the client's shift in what they actually expected from us. Or the reason we thought they were buying that truck from us was so they could haul their boat, but the real reason was because they felt safe in it, or whatever. Long story short, assumptions are the problem that gets caught in the way that normally causes this issue. So you overcome it by directly asking your clients and prospects what it is that the answer would be, and then be willing to overhaul it. The other thing that I do with all of my employees and all of my clients' employees as well is, we don't do hourly or salary payments. Essentially, every single position is going to be tied to one of those revenue activities that the client expects, whether it be in the client's world or behind the scenes. That part's irrelevant, but doing something the client expects to make their life better, and then they're compensated based upon their success of that activity. And what very quickly occurs is that now everyone is involved, with a client, which is good. But now the relationship isn't, sales messed up, they're the ones who didn't capitalize on this $1 million marketing campaign we did. Nah, marketing gave us the wrong people. That's their fault. You don't get that anymore. You get the actual salespeople talking to the marketing guys. Hey, position it as this is the problem that we solve, so they're pre-ready to buy from us. That way we don't got to cut through as much chafe. By the way, we're converting more leads for you. You're getting paid more. I'm getting paid more. Everyone wins. That is one of the easiest ways to go about it. But there is a word of caution to this tale and why people don't want to do it. Twofold. First is, there's a lot of segment of employees. I would use the baseball analogy, is that there's a third of the games you're going to lose no matter what. There's a third of the games you're going to win no matter what, no matter how good or a bad team you are. That's life. So what do you do with that middle third? Same thing's true with employees. There's a third of them that just want to do the absolute bare minimum and get paid and go home. And then there's a third of them that will become the absolute rock stars that will go the extra mile and they'll do everything possible. And then that middle third is where will you guide them? That part is true with employees. So if you're hiring a bunch of people that just want to do the bare minimum and go home, and you instill this process, they will make your world hell until they leave. They will leave eventually, but they will be a very difficult roadblock to overcome. That's issue one. Issue two is more of an accounting problem, is that there's a lot of business owners out there that want to have that if they make an extra 100,000 widgets, their bottom line essentially goes up by the profit margin of those widgets, because they view their employees as a fixed expense rather than a variable expense. We treat your employees basically, the better you're doing, the better we're doing, so you're getting paid more along the way. So people look at some of my companies, just to give you a very basic example. A design artist who makes JPEG imagery for Facebook and Instagram. For very many of your marketing firms, that's an entry-level position. And if you ever want to get paid real money, you have to become the head of that company, which is a completely different job description and skill set. But if you're good at it, and you're keeping my bar full every single Monday and Tuesday night, I want you to hey, I want you to keep doing this. So we're going to compensate you accordingly. By the way, this is the work you want to do anyway. So it's a win-win across the board. So yeah, those are the two downsides of incentivizing your clients to be on the same team as the revenue cycle. But the upside is through the roof, because it actually creates a true team environment where not only do we all benefit, but I need you to be successful. So now I have an encouragement to counter what Sasha's question was early, because I want you to do better. I need you to do better. I have created magically all my doors are open and we know how to communicate with each other, because I'm not living in fear. If I'm not good at my job, my paycheck tells me that on Friday. And guess what? That person eventually leaves and the right person will fill their spot.
I love that philosophy because it's people based, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked a lot of companies where it's revenue shareholder based, or they operate at a different level. When my whole argument used to be, okay, I get that, but you got to take care of this first, otherwise all of that breaks down. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you're expecting to give to your shareholders, if we're just doing that and then we're ignoring that bottom line piece, which is the employees, if we're ignoring that bottom line piece, which is making sure that they are able to take care of. And I think that's the system that you kind of set up, where you're empowering them. You're empowering them to have responsibility and be more part of the process. And that gives you two things. You succeed and you do well, but you also can fail and do poorly, and it all rests on you, which I think is incredible. That's good.
That's absolutely true. And it also changes the role of your managers. Your managers are now here to help build you up and assist. We also, and this is true regardless of how high in the company you get, part of your job is always still tied to one of those revenue tasks. So even if you're the CEO, you're still doing something that's directly involved with the client's experience throughout it. So no one ever gets so high up the management chain that they're disconnected from the clients, which is a very real problem with the vast majority of businesses out there.
Especially business owners.
Yeah.
So Joe, most of what you do really involves effective communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what Elite Business Conversations does, right? You go in and you have a conversation with the company, you have a conversation with leadership, you have a conversation with management, hopefully you have a conversation with employees, which is our emphasis. So what's more difficult when you get into a company? The two scenarios are the leadership, someone in a managerial or supervisory role who needs to make that paradigm shift because they're continuing to work the way they've done for the last 20 years. And this is the way they treat employees, and they haven't seen the light yet. Is it more difficult to create that paradigm shift in them through your conversations? Or is it more difficult to take, using your baseball analogy, the third of the employees that are malleable, right? That could be great employees or could fall back into the average employee. But that third, some of them are going to be resistant to the change as well. So is it more difficult to change a manager or an employee as far as mindset?
The manager. I mean, there's no doubt about that, especially when they're the owner. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that, because the bottom third of your employees are going to hate no matter what change you do. Unless that change is directly just giving them a check for no more work and not changing anything about them, they're going to reject any single change that you do with the bottom third. The middle third will just go to, quite frankly, whichever is more dominant within your company, the bottom third or the top third. So yes, getting the managers to change, because in a very real way, you are addressing a fact that for X amount of time, you've been doing it wrong. And often by the time that we get called in, you've been doing it very long, for typically a pretty long time, which is not a problem. We overcome this all the time, but that's the hardest hurdle to get through. It's the exact same reason why, Jenny Craig will be on advertising. The exact same people will sign up for it every single January, because you can get a fire under you and try to do something for a couple of weeks. But unless you change your core essence, you're going to go back to eating Big Macs and have to come back to Jenny Craig next year. It's the same thing. It's the way that our brains are built. And it does take a dramatic amount of change to overcome that. That's why when you look at my drills, most of them are psychology based, because that's really what we're coming about and solving, whether it be enticing the relationship with the employees or the client. That's the issue. So yeah, sometimes there's business owners that just, I know deep down are never going to do it. And guess what? They don't become clients. And then there's some people that, this is only going to work if you get rid of that person. Are you going to be willing to do that when the time comes or not? Because I can tell you right now, whether you hire me or not, 3 years from now, that guy's going to be fired. Just do you want to do it now and get it done with, or do you want to stymate and struggle? It's your call, man.
Very good. Thank you for that
conversation with the person being a co-owner, by the way, on the same call.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the most liberating thing you can see, because deep down they already know it. It's just logistic of how do we have the conversation, and sometimes you just need someone to be blunt and tell you the way it is.
I love that, and I agree with it. I told one of my supervisors before, I said, hey, don't try to get me for my performance, because I know I perform. If you don't want me here, have a conversation with me about it and we can figure that out. And if I need to go somewhere else, I'll go somewhere else, because I don't want to work for somebody who doesn't want me there. That's
exactly it. The line is true. If you can't see yourself working with someone a year from now, you shouldn't be working with them today. I mean, that is a true fact. And it doesn't matter what the it's not even working. It's a relationship thing. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. That's the way that it is. So unless you're in something where you're like required to overcome this, like a roommate in college or something, you have to figure out how to just move on and surround yourself with the people that are the best for you.
I say, especially if it's a roommate in college, but okay.
Well, that's learning skills. I don't know where you guys went, but I could have just changed roommates just because I had a fight with them. We had to figure it out.
So if I can bring it back, one of the things that we haven't talked about but kind of overrides everything is throughout this is the idea of honesty. And, underneath everything that you've said so far is being honest with your employee. If they're not going to make it, you tell them and then you get rid of them. And the same thing with the communication and how it all comes. I know that when I was in sales, I was always honest with my customers. If they ever caught me in a lie, I was done.
Yeah.
And how important is honesty and communication in the workplace? And the corollary to that, is it ever acceptable to lie to your boss? Yeah, boss, I'm happy. I love it.
Lying never really works in the long run.
Thank you.
It'd be a short-term task in front of a magistrate about a speeding ticket, I suppose, but it never really works in the long run. So to your point about honesty, there is more to it that's needed than just honesty. And I think this is where it can really stagnate some people who just want to be honest, is that there also is the much scarier version that you need to have in there, which is the acceptance of your own vulnerability, that I'm saying something and it might just flat out get rejected. I mean, I came on this show earlier and told you that I created a podcast where I talk about God a lot. There could have been half your audience could have turned it off for all I know. But the reality is that you have to be open and be willing to be vulnerable. And the second part of this is you have to have true humility. And most Americans don't actually know what the actual definition of humility is. Humility is not making yourself so small that you're insignificant and can't do anything. What humility is actually knowing where you are in the balance and the seesaw of life. There's some things that I'm not capable or going to be good at doing. You're not putting me at the foul line to go win the NCAA title. It ain't happening. But you're also not going to think that I can't go and represent on a sales call either. So humility is knowing where you are at in the appropriate spot of light. So I do need to bring those two things up when you're talking about honesty, because when you bring them up, it then becomes, as you were just saying earlier, I'll go work someone else. Well, the reason you know that is because I know I'm better. I'm going to get a gig in 3 minutes, dude. Whatever, man. So that's one of the ways to go about it and to really know. And I do stress people to get those 3 skills down. And if I were going to add another one to it, it would be a word that you guys asked me about earlier. It would be courage. You can get pretty far with just those four clubs in your bag. you can get pretty far through life with courage, humility, honesty, and vulnerability.
Thank
Great.
you. I wish that the people we're going to see in Pennsylvania in a few hours from now were as honest and forthright as you are. They could learn something from you.
Well, I'm here in PA myself, so if I need to tell someone, I'm willing to tell anyone. That's why we're doing this live, right?
Absolutely.
That's right. We have a segment of the show, if you hadn't had a chance to see it, where we call it SSP, shameless self-promotion, right? Before we get there, though, I want to ask you a question. You had mentioned earlier that every Monday morning you have all your clients go through their exercises, right? Mm-hmm. Is that something that you do in a group setting? Is it a webinar where everybody comes on, or do you do it for all of your clients at one time, or you do it for each of your clients separately?
Well, so first off, it's an independent drill. It is something that everyone who's in my sales course goes through. Pointing at my own background as I'm touching, I can't even point the right spot. It's everyone who goes through my sales course goes through. Like I said, that is the Monday drill. There are 5 of them, and we blow up your phone to make sure that you do it. That's one of our ways of making sure that no one falls through the cracks. So that unless you blocked our text messages from us, which at that point you probably don't want to be coached anymore, you're getting a reminder of this is what today's drill is. This is a quick video of how you do it again, and let's get on it. And so to answer your question, that's how we go about it. But I do not do it with people because this is you diving into your own personal ocean of emotion. You need to be able to swim there yourself. So this is you putting yourself in your sensory deprived place. This is you looking at your own past issues. Like, I'm looking at 3 different people we've never met in person before. How am I supposed to know what the biggest, scariest memory that you wish went differently was going to be? I mean, it's not realistic. Yeah. So what we do is we teach people how to do it, and we prompt them to do it when the time does come. And there are clients that just, quite frankly, when it hits, they just sit down and do it. They've shown me, like, that's my chair over there, and I sit there when I get your text, and everything's shut down for half an hour. Okay. Yeah. Like, make sure it's in your calendar so no one bothers you. But yeah, okay.
Thanks for the clarity, because I wanted to make sure, because we want to promote you, right? We want to promote Elite Business Conversations. So I think that clarity gives an additional idea to the listeners, to our audience, about how they might want to use your services or your company's services for themselves or for their company. Okay. And then I have a final question. A lot of your approach is, in fact, psychology based. You're really getting into the heads of the people that you're communicating with. Do you have a psychology background? How did you get to that place? Is it just that you've learned through the years, or is it something that you were formally trained in?
I was not formally trained in psychology.
Okay.
But long story short, I'm one of these people who always just wants to learn more. And I think genuine fascination is something that should be encouraged. But that was one of the areas that I did learn. One of the reasons I learned it was because I was in sales. The more I learned about it, I got immediate results. Like, hey, this stuff worked. Like, maybe you should look into this a little more. Not going to try to say that everything I learned through various books, podcasts, etc., was good or even ethical. But at the end of the day, that's part of what I think every person needs to do, is to be able to sit there, listen to information that they may or may not agree with, and kind of figure out if it's worth knowing or using. There's still people to this day that won't buy a particular version of car based upon the country it was manufactured in. Now, that doesn't mean it wouldn't necessarily be the right answer for you. So that's how I treat information the same way. Absorb it, look at what it is, and sure, there's lots of things I hear that I will never implement or really ever want to remember. But that's just how you got to approach it. Things you remember, and you go at it, and you be open to hearing things you don't want to hear. Especially now that it's election season. You're going to get 5 million commercials between now and that day. Some of them you're not going to like. Are you going to make yourself a raging ball of anger just because you saw someone you didn't want to see on TV, or someone said something nice about the guy you don't want to root for? Yeah. Well, that's your call about how you want to live your life. So, but no, to answer your question, no, I never formally did get a psychology degree or anything like that. What I did was just be open to learn about various things. And quite frankly, I think some of the best examples of true psychology is unbiased history. When you read history from unbiased sources, normally you got to go way back in time to truly get them, but you'll get some of the best answers, and you dive into a little deeper about what actually made this guy think it was going to work. Taking all of the stigma aside from it, no one has ever invaded Russia in the winter and it was a good idea. Why did this guy try it? And you actually get into a lot deeper thought processes just than blanket statements of they were evil or they were stupid or whatever, but actually thinking about what they saw and what they were thinking that made people put these decisions in place. And, it also makes you be real to the situation. Desperation is real and losing your power is scary.
Yeah.
So those are types of things that you learn about without ever trying to learn about psychology, but I picked up along the way.
Well, you've learned your trade. You do a phenomenal job. And we love having you on the podcast. This was great for us. We had lots of gems come out of it. So now we turn it over to you. So now's your shameless self-promotion. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way to look at your shows, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so you guys are all watching me currently on LinkedIn. I'm sure you guys got me posted everywhere else. But the easiest way is just go to my profile here on LinkedIn. And then in terms of the self-promotion, I've already touched upon Casino Sales Master, Proven System to Beat the Odds in Sales and Life. That is both the book and the sales course, both which will be fully released here shortly. They are in their beta testing. So sorry, someone who wants to buy that right now. Hook me up. We can set you up with that. But the thing that I would want to promote is what I do with my on-stage teaching, both in corporate workshops and teaching from the stage. The two most popular ones that I'm getting requested for is how to keep my prospects to not to want to lie to me anymore. And what we talked about here, how to get the most out of my employees without destroying my bottom line. So those were the two things in terms of shameless self-promotion. That's what I give workshops and speeches upon. I love to be at your company doing it soon.
Great. Thank you on behalf of everybody that's listening. You're a great presenter, and we're hoping to put together a conference, you would call it, where we have guest speakers come in sometime next spring or summer, probably here in Las Vegas. So if we can entice you to come out, I think we're going to send an invitation to you to come out and be one of our speakers, because you speak to our audience, on both sides, and that's rare. A lot of the guests that come on our show speak to either the employees or the employers, and you have that ability to speak to both sides separately and together. So we look forward to that.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, off the bat, I love everything I'm hearing. We just got to figure out the rest of the steps, right?
Great, we'll definitely do that. Kobe,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lloyd. Do you have any last questions before we turn over to Kobe?
Nope, I'm just sitting next to him at the pie-gow table and blackjack when we go to Vegas.
Okay.
It'll be roulette.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love everything about this show. I think you're spot on in your coaching. I'm actually curious to see some of the other things that you have available for your coaching. Like I said, I think you're spot on. To everybody that came to check us out, please make sure you go and support Mr. Rockey, support his environment. Support our channel, Great Employees Matter, on both YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're brand new. We're just starting. So please give us your suggestions. Let us know how we can get better. Let us know what you guys want to talk about. We're working for you guys. Again, thank you, Joe. It was a great show. And with that, we're going to end because we're way over.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Sorry for going long, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you all.
Hey, stay on, Joe.